Hello everyone, welcome to a new banner review. This time we'll take a look at Harmony Amidst Chaos, which is surprisingly on time considering. And, well, let's get started, eh? First off is Ferdinand, which is butchered beyond belief. Of course. Ferdinand was actually the character I wanted the most out of the four. And when I found out that it was a Focus 4-star, I kind of just gave up on any chances of him being good. And considering his kit, yeah, that sounds about right. Vanguard was already available on Thea, Reposition was available on Silas, Fortress Def was available on Seth. So all we got from him is fodder for Raw Speed Def, which is kind of helpful because speed buffs are still really scarce to this day, at least in the 3 to 4 star pool. So at least there's that for him. As far as the unit is concerned, well, he's pretty mediocre. That's the best way I can really describe him. Let's move on to comparison so you have at least some idea of what I'm talking about. Oscar and Abel. I'm not even gonna touch 5-star exclusives because we already know now that 4 to 5-star focuses downgrades to 3 to 4 star units. This is worth mentioning because I know for a fact that people were curious and you can get Raph at 3-star right now. So, yeah. This is pretty helpful because it means we don't have to wait for a unit to get demoted from 4-5 to 3-4. And it also means that beyond that banner, you cannot be pity broken by those characters. At least there's that. That's actually pretty helpful and pretty nice to see, you know, happen as a change. I still think that under introduction banner, they should not be available even as 5-star, but only as 4-star. But that's just me. But yeah. Now let's talk about comparison. So there's another unit I would like to also mention that is a worthy comparison, which is Conrad. Conrad has 11 more res and 4 more defense and also 2 more attack. Roughly the same health. I believe he actually has more health. And the only thing that he has behind Ferdinand is you know, speed. The thing is, Conrad at higher merges is able to actually fix his speed to a point that is such that he actually ends up quick, but also bulkier than Ferdinand. Completely overshadowing him in every regard. As for the other two, these two are more like showcasing the difference between Ferdinand and more offensive-oriented Landscavs. There are many Landscav that are better than Ferdinand, but I just decided to settle on those two mostly. Oscar gets a Slaying Lance with 16 might that gives him 3 attack and speed as long as he's around another Cav or infantry unit, and he also provides 3 attack and speed to, well, Cav and infantry units, which makes him able to work as a support unit while also being better offensively than, you know, Ferdinand, because overall his weapon is essentially 19 might. So if you're considering, you know, comparing the two of them together, if you take a Slaying Lance and refine it to speed, you end up with 46 attack and 38 speed, which is not really good for Ferdinand, because if you look at Oscar on the right, you're basically looking at 52, 37. So you're behind 1 speed, but ahead 6 attack. And you have a slaying effect, which kind of means that regardless of what you're going to do with, you know, Ferdinand, considering slaying is typically the best weapon by de facto, unless you have something really good with your stat line like Conrad does, well, you're gonna struggle to even just compare to Oscar, okay? So, you're already in a bad spot, no matter how you look at it. But then you compare the bulk, which is the one thing you have over Oscar, and you're only 1 more HP higher than the enemy, 4 def and 3 res, which is just not enough. Oscar is going to eat you and just completely ignore you in the process. You just cannot compare, and Abel is even worse. Abel is probably the comparison that makes him look absolutely the worst. Because Abel has more attack, roughly the same HP, more res by only 1 point, and defense is behind, but it really isn't that much behind. Abel's weapon is a Brave Lance, a 16 might Brave Lance that works as long as he's around a cav with either a lance, axe, or sword, and for any ally that he has around him, he gets 2 attack and defense on top of it. So, what that means is effectively his lance can be as good as a 22 might Brave Lance. That's already pretty yikes for Ferdinand, but let's just consider 2 people. Let's try to be nice here. 53 attack. 53 attack versus 46 attack. You're already 7 attack ahead of Ferdinand, and it's a brave weapon. And on top of that, Abel doesn't lose any speed in the process. Meaning that the only thing you have over him is 3 speed, and even if you had Desperation up, you're still behind in damage. Do you see the problem here? Now, let's also add the fact that with 2 people, he gains 4 defense, which means you're effectively comparing 29-25 to 30-24. The stat line is virtually the same in bulk at that point. Except he actually gets a brave weapon and 7 more might in the process than you. So yeah, there's just really no point in ever using Ferdinand over Abel, just because Abel has so much firepower, and if you think your slaying lance set would work, then Oscar kind of just shit on the very idea. So yeah, Ferdinand is in a very, very sad spot as it is. It's completely unfortunate, but honestly, there's just nothing to say here. Ferdinand is just a pointless addition. The only thing he brings to the table is the fact that he has Rao's death speed on him, which can be a good fodder. Which, oh well. What can I say? That's basically all he has for him. But yeah, let's move on to the next unit. Next up is Bernadette. Now, Bernadette is going to point out one of the main problem with units on this banner is that their weapon is rather clunky, minus Annette. Persecution Bow is... it's a weapon. Essentially, the 2 conditions that you can fulfill in order to proc the Persecution Bow is either get hit by a debuff, which can be a struggle, of course, or to have less than full HP. Now, the second condition is a lot more forgiving, but it also means that typically on your first encounter, you're not going to get the 5 attack and speed, nor Desperation up. This is kind of a problem because it means that if you're being compared to either Muligir or Cunning Bow, your bow is worse. Because it essentially means that while at full power, Persecution Bow is going to be typically slightly, and I do mean slightly better than Brave Lynn or, you know, Claude. But the setup is a lot more clunky. The other problem is the fact that Bernadette doesn't exactly have bulk, so not having the 5 speed right off the bat can actually bite her in the ass. And the one thing that she actually has, though, that's nice, is the fact that the weapon is a 17 might weapon instead of 14. Very often do we get 14 might on the weapon with 3 speed for no reason, and the speed doesn't really help the unit. Looking at you, Claude, your bow is not giving you any favor. But in this case, the speed would have probably been helpful, because getting hit by chill speed would be easier. The way she is right now, because she's a bow cav, it makes her really hard to get hit by a chill. It means that you almost need to get hit by a ploy, which is not exactly something you can rely on. And debuffs in general requires you to rely on the enemy getting a debuff on you. It works in AR to some extent, but in AR, bow calves are not as helpful as you'd think, You typically prefer a bow flyers because there's a lot of maps that has actual like lava or anything of the sort that actually restrain your movement. Whereas, you know, bowcav tend to have to deal with trenches, they have to deal with awkward placement, and that's kind of a problem in general for bowcavs. Now, the other problem is the fact that she doesn't get rid of the penalty. So even if you do get hit by chill speed, so your weapon work, the chill speed might actually prevent you from getting a follow-up anyway. Which is not exactly helpful because it essentially means that if you get hit by chill speed, your weapon is effectively a glorified bootleg death blow weapon. Right? Because you essentially get 5 attack and -2 speed. It's overall kind of iffy, and honestly, the sad part about this is that this weapon could have worked if she had been an infantry unit. Let's not kid ourselves here. If she had been a bow infantry unit, which would have made much more sense because in Gen 2 in Treehouses she's a sniper, she's never seen on an actual horse in any event of the game unless you yourself make her become a bowcav. So very similar to Claude, she's a bowcav for no reason whatsoever. And it's just really stupid. Because she has a weapon that's very similar to Mulagir, to Cunning Bow. So it's essentially like the third time making the same unit, except you're just like less convenient. That makes Bernadette a kind of overall very clunky to work with. And at the very least, though, in her case, she's in an easier spot than Lucifia when it comes down to prefs. Because while her pref is unwieldy, once it gets going, it's good. You know? So, yeah, that's at least not too bad. But I do feel like the condition of needing to get hit by a penalty or having less than full HP should be on characters that can actually take a hit much more reliably than she can. 22 def and 38 HP is not exactly good, and in a lot of cases can get you one-shotted, and that's kind of a problem in general with Bernadette. If you get one-shot, doesn't matter how much speed you have, you just die. And that's a problem that Claude doesn't have, because his weapon effectively gives him 5 attack, speed, def, and res, instead of 5 attack and speed. So, I've already mentioned them, but let's go to comparison. The other two are Claude and, you know, Bravelyn. One thing to note is the fact that because Bernadette's weapon gives 3 extra attacks, she does end up having more attack than them. And in her case, she ends up having enough speed as well because of her weapon. The main problem, like I said earlier, is the fact that Claude's weapon is a lot more, you know, workable. Claude's condition is essentially you have one of two things you can do for the weapon to work. You need the enemy to have 10 points of debuffs, or you want to have 10 points of buff. In other words, if you get buffed by own cav, you're good to go. You already have the 5 across the board, or rather, you reduce 5 across the board from the enemy. This makes it extremely easy. And Bravelyn, in her case, gets 4 attack, speed, def, and res, if she has more speed than the enemy. So that's even less setup, because it's no setup at all. All you need is just more speed than the enemy. That's it. Another thing that Bravelyn has is access to Sake's Blessing. I think you guys are probably tired of me pointing this out. I think we all know what Sake's Blessings do, so I'll leave it here. Overall, I think Bernadette can work at higher merges, because at higher merges, you tend to end up bulkier. And essentially, you get more bulk, and enemies get less attack. What I mean by this is, once you're from +0 to +10, you get 4 attack, right? But you also get 4 HP, death, and res, meaning you essentially get 8 points of bulk as long as you don't get doubled. You end up having more bulk overall. So instead of, say, 60 bulk and defense, you have 68. Whereas, unlike someone that could kill you at 60 attack, they now have 64 and fail to get the double. Or, not the double, but the kill, rather. I think you get what I'm getting at. At higher mergers, she's better, but that's also a fact about Bravelyn and Claude. And Bravelyn is on Hero Fest literally every year, because we're getting an Hero Fest every anniversary event with a Hero Fest banner on it. And Hero Fest are 5% banner, so plus 10ing Bravelyn is a lot more feasible than Bernadette if you don't have a plus 10 of her already. So therefore, Bernadette is kind of not really in a good spot. Not to mention, Lyn also gets the effect that any range unit do not have a chance to buff against her whatsoever, which is also pretty helpful. So, yeah. Overall, I'd say Bravelyn is probably the best option here, and Claude is second, and then Bernadette is last, which is kind of funny because that's also the chronological order in which they came out. Honestly, I was debating on not even making a build for her, but, well, here you go. It's very obvious that you don't have a whole lot of option. The main thing that Persecution Bow does for you is giving you access to Desperation. That's something I actually forgot to mention. That's one of the problems with bow cav units. If you were a bow infantry unit, the fact that you don't need to use your B slot on Desperation is a lot more helpful. But the thing is, if you're a cav bow unit, do you know how many options you have for your B skill? You have access to Lulz, Vantage, Desperation. That's kind of all the 3 skills you have access to for your B skill. And breaker skills, I guess? Oh, and be careful, also the even tie skill from Nils. Ooh! Yeah, I'm not going to kid anyone here. That's pretty trash. That's not going to help a whole lot of people here. And therefore, it's not exactly amazing, right? So, because of this, it makes her a lot less desirable than the other 2. So, what she has on the left is just low attack def with sturdy blow, hit hard, and with desperation, it allows you to proc Luna every 2 fight, essentially. This is a lot more helpful to break through a unit that has a lot of def. The set on the right is more so like you hit, you proc, you hit, you proc, because of Heavy Blade and the fact that you have desperation on the weapon. And that's it. There's not a whole lot you can do with her weapon. It's very, very straightforward, very one note, and there's just not much you can do about it. So, yeah. Now, moving on to Lysithea. Now, I've already said this, but Lysithea's weapon is clunky as all hell. Let me just explain. One of the biggest draw in having cooldown -1 on a tome unit, I specify tome unit because physical ranged unit with cooldown -1 have access to Brave Lucina. Lysithea does not have access to Brave Lucina, so you can't actually just like invest in her bulk and somehow make close counter work with Brave Lucina with Aether or something like that. It just doesn't work. This is something Ygritte can do because she's a melee unit. Or rather, she hits the def stat, which allows Brave Lucina to support her. So, Ygritte is actually able to pull that off. Lysithea is not able to pull shit. I think we're on the same page here. Also, Ygritte has more stats, which is pretty helpful. Which leaves me to go on the next point. Lysithea actually has a few problems. The biggest problem that she runs into is the fact that, well, not the biggest, but one of the problems that she has in terms of BST is the fact that she is the worst scoring mage infantry unit of the game. She has 160 BST. I know this doesn't matter for a lot of people who actually just want the unit itself. But I'd rather point this out. Even with a super boon, she is stuck in the 160 to 164 BST bin. Whereas every other mage ever are 161 BST with a super boon or base 162 BST, like Brunia. And those are able to go into 165 to 169 BST bin. Outside of one mage, which we're going to get to, oh boy, he is like one of the main comparison I can make with Lucifia. But essentially, because of that, every other mage can score higher, and the fact that she has a pref does not matter. Ever since we have inheritable C skill with 300 SP cost, and this is going to go over the head of a lot of people. If you really want more information about how arena score is calculated, I have a video on my channel. I think you can just Google something like Fearless J Arena Score Tutorial. Something like that. It should give it to you. It's old, but it's actually not outdated. Though I was mentioning a few combos back then. And 300 SPC skills are now a thing. So, essentially, the way SP score is calculated is not every time you have more SP, you score better. Okay, that's actually a myth. It's every 100 SP that matters. Every 100 SP you go up an SP bin, essentially. Now, this is a problem in general, or rather, it used to be a problem, but now it really isn't, until B skill gets inheritable 300 SP skill. Because the way it is right now, if you have a pref with a 300 SP skill, you score the same as a unit that doesn't have a pref but two 300 SP skill. A C skill and an A skill. We don't have 300 SP B skill, so there's that. And for those who wonder what happens if you have a pref and two 300 SP skill, unless one of those are a B skill, it doesn't matter. Or rather, it doesn't matter in general. You need three 300 SP passive ABC for it to matter. What ends up happening if you only have two 300 SP skill is that your BST bin, your SP bin will go from 2000, well, or rather your SP cost, which is the total cost of all your SP skill, will be at 2220, and once you have, that's with one 300 SP skill and a pref. And then if you have two 300 SP skill, you go from 2220 to 2280. So you don't go up 100, which means your SP score does not improve. So that's not really a problem. And then there's A1, which is the main comparison with Lucifia here. A1 is 166 BST, and 2 super boon in attack and defense. Which means he actually scored as high as a 170 to 174 BST character. To put this in perspective, he scores the same as Hector, Gen 1 Hector of course, a Gen 1 armored unit. That's how good he scores. That's insane. And that's a mage. And he has a whole 6 more points overall than Lucifia, and his stat line is better spread around. So yeah, not only does he score literally 2 SP bin over, well, not 2 SP bin, they score the same SP bin, but he scored 2 BST bin over Lucifia. He's just overall better. So that's kind of iffy overall, and we're talking about score here. Now, for the unit itself, we're done with the technical stuff, guys. Don't worry about it too much. For the unit itself, Addis is overall basically Mjolnir, but I think Mjolnir, when it's going to be refined, might actually get refined to be better than this. As weird as that is to say. Because a weapon is essentially cooldown -1, just like Mjolnir. Susparo instead of Mjolnir's Darting Blow, which is most likely going to become Susparo in the future. Let's be honest. And then the last skill, which is honestly stupid. Attack +6 if special is ready during combat. Oh boy, I hate this skill so much. The fact that it gives 6 attack during combat is kind of iffy to begin with. But the fact that you need your special to be ready means you cannot actually abuse the fact that she has cooldown -1 on the weapon. What typically you want to do is to run AoEs on cooldown -1 users. okay? Here's the problem. Look at her bulk. For stuff, it's hard to set up AoEs. Can't run life and death, otherwise you're just going to die in one hit too often. Right? So you're stuck with Fury. That's already a bad start. The other part that actually sucks is the fact that the way AoE works, you're going to proc. Your special is not ready when you enter combat, meaning you don't get the 6 attack from that weapon. This essentially strips down the weapon to cooldown -1, so spare. Which is still good. Cooldown -1 is a really strong ability on mages, and she's literally the only red mage with cooldown -1 on her weapon. But it just doesn't work for her. It's not that helpful overall for her, and that's kind of a problem. They decided to give her Time's Pulse so she could proc Moonbow, get hit, and proc Moonbow again. Similar to how Ira is used with, you know, Ragnar Lastra. And now Larsay and Shannon. Or rather, Larsay and Larsay, because Shannon is not getting the cooldown -1 he deserves. Anyway, here's what I would have done to actually adhere to how she works in her game and actually work better. I would have just, instead of the 6 attack during combat, I would have replaced that for Wrath. Could have been either Wodao effect, like cooldown -1 Wodao. Believe it or not, it's not as broken as you think because you don't have as many points of stat to play with, especially with how frail she is. Or you could have just given her like the one less than 75% HP, get cooldown -1 at the start of turn, which means you don't get time pulse. You don't need to waste, you know, time pulse. Or you can combo it with time pulse to use Draconic Horror right away. That's also an option. Overall, you know, Wrath would have just actually worked a lot better for her and actually synergize with herself. The fact is, with 41 attack, not getting the 6 attack for AoEs does not trigger on the AoE itself either. That's kind of not great, is it? The best way to really describe Lucifia is Ophelia but balanced, because she doesn't get a way to proc AoEs from the get-go. She doesn't actually, you know, get a weapon that works with what she's doing, and a weapon doesn't exactly do an advantage that's extremely amazing. Yeah, she has a lot of attack and a lot of speed, but she's so frail that she can't really take, you know, her weapon as something that can be abused. Which makes her overall kind of iffy, and her res is too low to actually invest in for her to ploy with, even at +10. Which makes her extremely stuck in a state of one-trick pony, in the sense that she hits really hard once, and that's kind of it. There's a way to actually abuse her weapon a bit better, but it's overall not that amazing. If this was Wrath, then we would have something to talk about, because then you'd be in a situation where you would genuinely do enough damage. You get 10 damage instead of 6 on the time you proc your damage. And it's not that busted because it requires you to go into battle once for Wrath to be charged. Meaning, if you one-shot her, it does nothing. If you don't one-shot her, then she becomes a little demon. You know? It would have been overall a lot stronger, fitting for a character with the short hard outburst and everything. And also overall unique. And don't come to me telling me, oh, but Tell2's a 3 to 4 star unit, Lucifia is a 5-star exclusive. There's no way in hell that Lucifia should be worse than Tell2. That's kind of just how it is. Low speed res is also neat. Doesn't really work for her because she already has too much speed to begin with. Literally on merge she hits 47 speed with just a buff and a weapon. So there's that. Another issue I have with her is the fact that she has Death Blow 4. Death Blow 4 is probably the worst tier 4 skill for uninitiation that we've got so far. Seriously. Death Blow does 8 more attack when you initiate. Versus, oh, Swiss Sparrow that gives 6 attack, so you lose 2 attack for 7 speed. Okay. Oh, I guess Darting Blow is also worse, but that's a given. Sturdy Impact, which you lose 2 attack for 10 death, which increases her survivability a lot and would have made her a really good fodder to pull. Mirror Impact, which makes you lose 2 attack for 10 res, which can be useful in certain cases. It's a very niche skill, but it can be pretty helpful. So overall, I don't understand why they gave her Death Blow for it. It should have been Sturdy Impact, in my opinion. Now, enough shitting around, let's talk about comparison. So, now you can see kind of the problem that you run into here. I'll talk about L1 first because he's the premier comparison, and then I'll talk about Tarsha and one other red mage that are also giving a run for money to Lysithea. So, first off, L1. L1 has a very good stat line. Like I said, he outscores Lysithea by a whole merge, essentially. 2 BST bin, 2 SP bin. Either one of those is equal to a merge, by the way. So essentially, L1 is essentially, in terms of score, a plus 11, Lysithea at plus 10. So, there's that. Then there's also the fact that, overall, look at the stat line L1 has versus what Lysithea has. 2 more def, 1 more HP, and 11 more res at the cost of 4 attack and speed. As I just said, Lysithea already has too much speed. No matter how you look at it, her speed is really high. And a weapon kind of just makes it even more apparent. So, that's already kind of just a problem. Besides, one of the best set you use on A1 is either Altome or Foxtome, both of which essentially give you 4 speed when you initiate or when you're getting attacked, depending. Or even when you initiate for the Altome, but that one is a bit more iffy. So, speed is not exactly a problem for A1 either, meaning the only thing that Lysithea really has is the 4 attack. This can be a lot more helpful, but the fact of the matter is, A1 is 35 base res. Do you know how much that is? That's enough to ploy even Surtur. And Surtur is a really high bench press to lift in terms of res. So, because Surtur hits as high as 38 res when he has 5 flowers, and he also has plus 10 merge. 38 res. And 1 hits 39 without flowers. So yeah, what happens if you use res ploy on the enemy, right, is that you end up having more attack than Lysithea overall. Kind of see the problem here? So you end up having more attack, HP, death, and res if you proc deploy on the enemy. This is kind of a problem in general with Lysithea. Though, keep in mind, Lysithea does get basically a weapon that jumps her attack as high as 24 might. So, yeah, 65 attack at best. And you use typically a Foxtome to initiate with when it comes down to A1, which means you'll be at 53, and with Ploy you're going to be at 58. You're still behind 7 attack. That one is a given. But A1 doesn't struggle with speed. And overall, because of Foxtome, he also gets an extra 4 def and res on initiation. This is also important because it just makes the problem Lysithea runs into in terms of bulk even more clear. L1 ends up with 6 more defense and 15 more res in terms of bulk. That's insane, no matter how you look at it. And that's kind of the problem in general. Because of this, it makes A1 a lot more flexible. He's able to use a lot more things, and the only thing that Lysithea really has is cooldown -1. The problem with cooldown -1 is that she can't really abuse it. So overall, A1 is very flexible, very easy to use, and is able to be used in a variety of ways, whereas Lysithea is forced to play in one certain way, because the second that she strays in any other way from a weapon to another, like Foxtome, A1 is simply better. And they're both 5-star exclusive, so there's that. The other unit here to compare is Tarja, and the last one would be Silica. I'll start with Tarja. Tarja... Oh boy, Tarja gets a blade toe. So, you know how I spoke about Lysithea having 65 might? Well, if you consider a blade tome on Tarja, that's up to 44 might for the weapon, which means that you end up at 76. Obviously, this is with buff, and 76 versus 71, considering a 6 attack buff on Lysithea, Tarja ends up with more attack. Speed is also not a problem, because the way our weapon works reduces the enemy's attack and speed by 4. Essentially making her speed, in reality, 44 at that point. With a 6 speed buff and our weapon. So 44 speed, you're already in a good spot. And that's without Fury, that's without merges, that's literally just our weapon and a speed buff. So you're in a good spot for speed, your attack is better, and your bulk is also better because your weapon basically reduces the enemy's attack by 4, making your bulk essentially 27-24, which is 6 more def than Lysithea, and the same res, and you have more health. I think you get the idea. If you're talking about a fully powered up Blade Tome Tarja versus Lysithea at her best, Tarja is just overall better. And the second that you switch to a Blade Tome on Lysithea, Tarja gets no cooldown penalty, whereas Lysithea does. And that kinda just hurts her a lot more, because the thing is with Tarja can just run something like Heavy Blade. Our weapon makes it even easier to proc, and you just hit Glimmer every time with Desperation, which is something Lysithea just simply cannot do. Not to mention, Tarja is also able to work as a support role, something Lysithea just cannot do. Lysithea, the only thing she can do is hit hard. This bites her in the ass, because Tarja is able to support other ally against melee units, by making those melee units lose 4 attack and speed, which essentially mean that the unit you're supporting gets 4 speed, def, and res. That's 12 points of stats. And that stacks with tactics, which makes her very helpful for your party in general. Whereas Lysithea, well, she's just very selfish and improves her attack and speed, which are already in overkill amounts. The other unit is obviously Silica. Silica has 32 attack, 33 speed, and I believe 22 def and res, as well as 39 HP. I'm going by memory here, so I might be wrong on these numbers, but it should be more or less correct. The thing that makes Silica overall better, however, is that while she has 32-33, her weapon is 14 might and provides an instant 5 attack and speed. This essentially means that your 46-33 becomes 51-38, with buff 57-44. So already there, no mergers, you're already speedy enough, 44, and 57 attack, which is 14 points behind Lysithea. However, when it comes down to bulk, you're very similar. And after the first fight, because you typically run Fury anyway, which is something you have to run on Lysithea because Life and Death gets you killed too easily, you end up losing enough HP to get in Brazen range, which means that you can just combo Brazen Attack Def and Brazen Attack Speed from the weapon, which essentially makes you more or less bulkier than Lysithea. You know? If you take Brazen Attack Res, I guess you end up having more Def and Res. Not by much, but you do. And your 57-44 jumps up to 71. Which is the same attack value as Lysithea, by the way. This is super easy to set up. Only requires one fight, which is a problem sometimes. Kind of like how Bernadette's weapon works. But typically you're able to just function even without getting to that point, kill something very easily, and no matter what happens in the fight, you get just all the buff. Bernadette's problem is that she has no way to also combo into Brazens. If, for example, you could run Brazen Attack Def and Brazen Attack Res, and her weapon just push you naturally into those brazen, that would make her a lot better, for example. But Ragnarok actually allows you to do this, and that's why Silica is really good. Now, while she does equal Lysithea in attack, while she does more or less, actually no, she ends up speedier than Lysithea, and she ends up having relatively the same bulk, if not better. The other thing that makes Silica really good is the fact that she's a Gen 1 unit, which means that she can have 10 Dragon Flower, which is another thing Tarja has, by the way. 10 Dragon Flowers, which means that you can have more stat overall than Lysithea, and also the fact that she's on weekly banners. Weekly banners have 4% chance of getting the unit, and 2% chance of pity breaks, which is insane, and it's on a 3-man banner. 3-man banners always have better rate than 4-man banners, no matter how you look at it. No matter how you slice it. That's just how it is. So, yeah. That's one hell of a situation, huh? Yeah, that's kind of the problem with Lysithea. She's not completely terrible, and it's a good one-off. But as far as investing in the unit, I genuinely would suggest you to just wait until the Brave Hero version of her comes out. Maybe get one copy of her because you like her. That's fine. Personally, I kind of want to do that, but Igraine kind of got a banner, and I'm 2 merge away from plus 10, so... Gonna try. And Lysithea is very low priority right now. But, you know, one copy, leave it at that, because going for investing in her, just wait for Choose Your Legend 4, I think? She actually has a better chance there at being semi-decent than what she is in her game. In this game, rather, right now. That's just the way I look at it. As for builds, set on the left is very obvious. It's essentially get into a fight, hopefully get in brazen range, use threaten attack rest to lower the enemy's stats, and then try to one-shot them with Draconic Aura, because you end up having 77 attack. Or no, 71 attack, sorry. If the enemy is hit by threaten, 76. So you just try to one-shot, essentially. Actually, no, my bad, I forgot to Sparrow, so 75 attack, 80 attack with threaten attack res up. Like I said, she's just very straightforward. She hits really hard once, and then she gets to get hit back. Sturdy Impact is a good way around it, because you end up with 4138. This is also why you don't go Attack Plus typically if you really want to invest in this unit. Unit on the right is using Time Pulse and Quicken Pulse to get Draconic Aura right off, which allows you to just essentially, you know, go straight away with Draconic Aura, which can be helpful to deal with unit with Pulse Smoke, so you kill them before the effect goes off. Or unit with Melancholy, so you kill them before you get hit by the weapon. Because these units will shut you down. If they do shut you down, you lose 6 attack already, and you lose your special. You're in a bad position at that point. So yeah, very straightforward. As for the second set of build, as I mentioned, you can use an AoE set on her, but it's kinda not great, because you don't get the 6 attack from the weapon. You never will get it with it, because you proc the AoE and then you go into combat, your special is not ready, therefore you don't get the 6 attack. This always will be a problem for her, and therefore it reduces your weapon to a Sparrow cooldown -1 weapon, but the fact that she has so much attack makes it work somewhat. Do know there's also an alternative version to this set, with Hardy Bearing, of course. Set on the left is basically just a bulkier version of the base set, essentially hit with Glimmer, proc, get hit, proc again with Glimmer. Could use Ruptured Sky, but because of low attack, you know, it's not ideal. Moonbow, but low res, that's kind of not ideal. So, yeah, that's kind of just what it is. There's really not much you can really say about how you can use Lysithea, which makes her overall very one note. That's kind of the problem with the unit in general. Next up is the actual gem of the banner, Annette. This should not surprise anyone, but I was kind of bitter seeing the weapon because it just says that, oh yeah, we can make melee weapon app calculate damage using the lower of foe's def or res, but we won't give it to Leaf. I hate this. Anyway, our weapon has adaptive damage, which is really good considering she has a really high attack. In fact, their stat line is probably the best stat line any axe unit has in the game. You'll see what I mean on comparison. She is absolutely disgusting in terms of stats. It's actually borderline ridiculous, but that's kind of just how she is. Rally attack speed and def res ruse, whatever. Attack def gap, whatever. It's really all about that weapon. You'll keep the assist and B skill. The gap skills are not really amazing because unless, you know, the unit you want to buff with this ends up just luckily enough having enough attack and def to be hit by it, great. If it's not the right unit, then it's a useless skill, basically. It's also less easy to actually hit the right character with it than in opening skill, which only requires the highest attack. So there's that as a problem. So yeah, and its weapon and stat line is what makes her so good. This weapon allows you to just give an extra movement to anything that is not a range cav. That is disgusting. It's a power cred version of Legendary Azura's dance skill. Or rather the second effect of the dance skill. I cannot believe that they decided to do this, because Legendary Azura was already rather cancer to begin with. This effect should also have inflicted isolation on the unit, in my opinion. But, oh well, that's just me. Isolation that would actually persist after the unit moves, I feel would have been a good way to actually balance this weapon. The way it is essentially you can get 3 movement on your infantry nukes, you can get 3 movement on your melee cav with Gale Force launch strats. Really, there's no limit, and that's kind of a very scary place to be. She is really good and adept at making rally traps, even more so than Legendary Azura, which is one of the most annoying things to ever see in this game. Rally traps are the worst. So the fact that it works also on calves and also on armored unit is kind of ridiculous. It's good for armored units though, because armored units won't need to be babysitted by armor march characters as well, which is extremely helpful. But in general, any skill that provides extra movement is a very, very, very powerful skill. Armor march was literally the plague to have to deal with in the first few months of its release, especially once Bullfighter came out, for example. That was really annoying to deal with. Now it's not that dangerous, but stuff like Legendary Azura are always going to be dangerous, and this weapon is also going to always be dangerous. So yeah, overall she is a very strong unit. And if we're talking about comparison, oh boy, Ross has the strongest offensive stat line of any 3 to 4 star. And before anyone asks, there is no Gen 4 unit that actually compares better than these 2 units to Annette. Most Gen 4 units, Gen 4 Axe Infantry units are not really good. Like Orsin's weapon is very gimmicky. And while Orsin is actually reliable, like almost, I will say almost comparable to Annette, he runs into one problem. And it's the fact that his res is too low, so he can't ploy. And because he can't ploy, that means Annette actually has another thing over him. And every other axe infantry are just not worth comparing. Ross is essentially a Gen 4 unit, even though he's a Gen 3, really. Because 3 to 4 star unit added to banners, or added to the pool that were not part of the banner, were essentially Gen 3 units. The only reason why he has the same BST as a Gen 4 unit is because he's a trainee unit, a trainee Gen 3 unit. And that, my friend, made him really strong. But as you can see here, Annette actually has more attack, and speed, and res than this guy. This is disgusting. And if you compare it to Libra, even if you add Libra in the fact that he can get an extra 5 Dragon Flowers than Annette, the only thing that ends up happening is that he ties her in res, has 1 more def than her, but is also behind by 3 points of speed and 3 attack, and the fact that Annette has a super boon and he doesn't pushes that difference to up to 4. That's not good for him. It overall limits Libra quite a bit. Or not really limits him, but rather makes it very hard to be compared. And on top of that, you know the other main thing that makes Russ and Libra a bit more balanced? They don't have prefs. This is definitely worth mentioning because Annette has one. And it's a really good one. The best pref of the entire banner, in fact. In fact, the only good one of the banner, if I'm being honest. The only one that is really good at synerging. And that weapon allows her to hit even more attack and allows her to hit res, which is a very helpful addition to her kit. And that's something that Ross and Libra can't do. Most unit ends up with a lot of defense but not as much res, which means that Annette, while she already has more attack than both, ends up having more attack in general because she hits res instead. Unless she deals with a caster, which she typically one-shots anyway. Annette is ridiculous. There's just no way about it. And because she's such a big ball of stats, there is a lot of building can do with her. And while I did not actually work on adding those stats, I will say this: bonus doubler on her is absolutely ridiculous, and can replace Fortress Death Res in most of these sets if you can buff her up. So, set on the left is meant to be more of a supportive set. She debuffs Def and Res by 5, and attack and speed by 5 with ploys. Now you may wonder, why oh why did I not use attack feint as the seal? Feint and ruse skills do not work in the same way. That's kind of a problem because the way ruse skills work is that regardless of the unit you're rallying or your position, whoever is in a cardinal direction of you of the ally you've been buffing gets hit by the ruse. Feint, however, only works from the unit you've buffed. Okay? That's kind of the problem. Essentially, ruse have 2 points, 2 epicenter of the debuff, whereas feint skill only have 1 unit as the epicenter of where the debuff spreads. Which essentially mean that there are places that you're going to be able to reach the enemy because of the ruse skill that the feint won't reach. Which is why it's overall better to just rely on ploy overall. You know? So she's a ball of debuff that can debuff def, res, attack, and speed by 5. She ends up with 47 def and res, and her speed is not bad at 46. And despite Fortress Def Res, she still has 66 attack, and she hits def or res, whichever is lower. Yeah, do you see how stupid she gets? Yeah, and for some reason they decided, yeah, leave Leaf should not get adaptive damage, even though it makes complete sense with the weapon, considering the weapon can hit magic or melee depending on the range at which you attack with it. Nah, that would be too broken, but it's fine on Annette. It's fine on Annette. As for the right set, this is a Gale Force set. This allows you to just attack, kill somebody, and then go back to actually rally someone to actually debuff the enemy. This is good to actually support the ally you're meant to buff, kill a unit that's problematic, and still support afterward. It's not really amazing, but it's an option you can actually run. Because, guess what? Despite the fact that she has Fortress Death Res, she still has 70 attack. The problem is that you will tend to one-shot also with this, so Death Plus might be better overall to avoid that from happening, and because if that does happen, you might not be able to proc Gale Force as a result. So, you know. As for the second set, or the second page of sets, set on the right is an AoE set. Deploy is there essentially to just lower the defense, which means an extra 7 to 8 damage from the AoE. Keep in mind, AoEs work with the weapon. Okay? This is important because it means that whichever the enemy has as lowest between Def or Res is going to be the target of the AoE. So if you're dealing with an armored unit with 50 defense and 30 res, well, your 68 won't target the defense and be like, oh, I did 27! No, it's going to hit the res, and therefore you're going to do 57 with the AoE itself. Or rather 62 because of Heavy Blade. This can also be a good idea to run Deathploy and Resploy as a result. But that really is up to you. It depends on your party. If you have other mage on the party, Resploy might be better to run instead of Attack Ploy. Attack Ploy is just a more all-rounder seal to run. Set on the left is more a just overall set if you want her to be more tanky. It allows you to effectively hit 69 attack, I know, nice. And upward to 47 def and 48 res. And you're still rather quick with this. Keep in mind this is without flowers, so flowers do push you to 47. If you have Brave Lucina as support, you get hit and proc Soul, which allows you to heal yourself back up. Saying Axe is only there because Soul becomes a 2 cooldown as a result. You can, however, still use Crusher, and if you use Crusher, what you can do is just run Noontime instead. So yeah, just thought I'd point that out. Soul is better for bigger heal, but Crusher will be more consistent in doing the one-shot and therefore potentially healing you better if you have to deal with units with a lot of defense. So yeah. Overall, very, very good unit, and by far the best unit of the banner. Weapon's not clunky, functions really well, gives her a lot of option, and is overall quite fun. It's just going to be a pain in the ass to deal with in the next 2 seasons of Arena. I'll just say that. But, yeah. With that said, in conclusion, they ruined my best boy, Ferdinand. Gave pretty mediocre weapons to Bernadette and Lucifia. Lucifia is such a tragedy, honestly. And actually made Annette, probably the least liked character of the 3, the best unit on the banner. I have no idea how I'm supposed to feel about this. Either they have lost grasp of what the game is supposed to be like, what is really strong in the game and what is really weak in the game, what is synergy in general, or they just, I don't know, just kind of miss the point. Or just don't care about, like, popularity. Overall, though, it's not that bad of a banner, but could have been definitely a lot better. So, with that said... Oh, and honestly, what they could have done with Bernadette's bow is instead of her HP instead of getting hit by a penalty, it should have been like, if unit's HP is under full HP, or if foe's HP is at max, that should have been the requirement. But of course we can't be as lucky as that, can we? So yeah, I don't even like Bernadette, but it really sucks. Regardless of if I like or dislike a character, it really sucks when people are waiting so long for a unit they want, and the unit just pans out to be bad with no like unit in sight that could replace the unit and be just a better version of the unit. Of course, there's still time skip, but I don't know when or if we're even going to touch that. So, yeah. Oh well. Hopefully it gets better in the long run. But with that said, I don't think I have anything to add to this banner, so have a nice one, everyone. And see you all next time for the refined tier list update. See ya!